What kind of hope do you see about the recovery of the evangelical mind, and in many ways the maturing of the evangelical mind? What evidence should we be looking at?
I think Mark Knoll's book, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind, was a landmark for the evangelical community, and particularly for those of us who are in higher education, thinking about, are we really cultivating at the very highest levels the Christian mind? And I think there's been a tremendous response to that, and I see a lot of signs of encouragement. I'll just mention one, and that is at Wheaton College, when we're getting applicants for positions, we have a wealth of very gifted, godly, talented scholars to choose from for almost any position we advertise.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be in the Evangelical Academy. There's lots of fantastic students who are going on to getting into elite graduate programs, but we're no longer trying to prove ourselves to try and get a seat at the table. I think that evangelicals have demonstrated they can do the highest level of scholarship in fields like history, philosophy, sociology. My great encouragement is the ways in which our young people are interacting with their peers at other institutions. So we have Gordon students who do research projects with Harvard students. I think 50 years ago that would never have happened.
And I think when you mention those fields, it's important for us to recognize that there are certain fields in which you can't have any kind of current understanding of the status of the field without the evangelical contribution. Certainly in philosophy. You can't talk about the recovery of philosophy as a discipline in the United States without reference to evangelical scholars, many of them who started young and are now older, and then many younger who have come along. And then in history, and in terms of history, you look at so much of what's being published in history, and these are young and maturing evangelicals. And so I do think there is an entirely new status of the conversation. And I think there's something else, and that is that younger evangelicals anticipate that kind of academic, intellectual, very robust conversation. They are acculturated into the life of the mind in a way that perhaps former generations of evangelicals had to be more seduced into it and led into it.
Another thing that encourages me is seeing the rise of Christian higher education globally. And I think in an earlier era, the leaders of institutions overseas were hoping to get some kind of help that would pull them up to a higher level. When I talk to leaders, provosts, and presidents from around the world, they're really ready to enter into more of an equal partnership with North American institutions of higher learning, and they want to cultivate on their campuses the integration of learning with faith in a way that we have a tradition of now in North America.
The irony is that as we've gotten stronger, better, more robust institutions, there has been a more ardent secularism as well that we're seeing. Campus ministry groups being kicked off of major campuses. There's almost a thought police in hiring practices at major institutions. So never has there been more opportunity, but also, frankly, more peril about the evangelical mind and the ways in which we can be bearing witness in the wider academy.
Is it fair to say that evangelical institutions, in that very context, recognize a very different kind of stewardship of the mind? Because in reality, Michael, an awful lot of these conversations on secular campuses and elite academic campuses are being shut down.
Absolutely.
And so the closing of the mind is happening in terms of the secular dynamic.
Yeah, there's not even an openness or willingness to engage on some of those kind of deeper faith questions.
And somewhat ironically, I find in Wheaton faculty that have taught at other institutions, secular institutions, they talk about the much greater freedom that they have on a Christ-centered campus to pursue the life of the mind, whereas I think historically people looked at Christian campuses as a place that was very restrictive in terms of the life of the mind, and I think just the opposite is the case at the present moment.
You think about that Mark Knoll book, so seminal when it came out, and you think about that first line in which he said, the biggest problem is that there isn't much of an evangelical mind. That's no longer true. But as we look to the future, where should we be really developing? Where should we be encouraging younger evangelical minds?
Yeah, I'll just mention one area that is a concern to me, and that is I think we have overall a lower level of biblical and theological literacy in the church. And we do have scholars, particularly ones who are trained in a secular context, that have not been cultivated in their Christian theology in as deep a way as they really will need to be in order to integrate learning with faith and think Christianly about their discipline. And so I think there is work for the church to do, particularly in that area.
In the academy, I'd say that one of the areas where we have the most dearth of intellectual leadership in the various fields is actually law. We have tons of Christian lawyers, but very, very few law professors who are committed believers. There's lots of opportunity.
I think in terms of many of the softer disciplines, the humanistic disciplines, there is also a shortage of explicitly evangelical minds, of younger evangelical scholars who are ready to say, I'm wanting to enter into many of those conversations. And so in some of these fields and also in the arts, I think more explicit Christian thinking is something that would certainly be welcomed.